Who's afraid of Amy Coney Barrett? Hi, I'm Scott Ott, and this episode of Bill Whittle Now is brought to you by the members at BillWhittle.com. And Bill, I got a chance to watch a little bit of the hearings at the Senate Judiciary Committee of President Trump's nominee to the U.S. Supreme Court, Amy Coney Barrett. And it was interesting, especially as the Democratic senators interviewed Judge Barrett, because they kept trying to fish for what her personal beliefs were on particular issues. And she kept responding by saying, in effect, and I misquote her, my personal beliefs really don't matter in the issue. The question is what's written in the law, what's written in the Constitution. And even if, as Judge Scalia would say, former Associate Justice Scalia would say, even if it comes out in the case in a way that I don't like, it's important that I keep to my philosophy of judicial interpretation of the statute and of the Constitution. Bill, it wonders me, as my Pennsylvania Dutch ancestors used to say, what's to fear in a person who says, look, it doesn't really matter whether I disagree with you on a moral issue, for example. All that really matters is what's written in the law.
I'll now do a brief dramatic reenactment of what the questioning senators' faces were when this was their answer. Mrs. Barrett, what's your personal opinion on abortion? Well, my personal opinion doesn't really matter. My job is to interpret the Constitution and deal with it in that fashion. And if I come up with a ruling that's consistent with the Constitution, but not what I particularly wanted, then I'm going to go with what the Constitution says. I'm sorry. No. And scene. It's inconceivable to the left that there would be standards above what you want, that there would be standards above power, standards above political agenda. And this is, I almost said it's anathema to them, but I'm not kidding. I just don't think they understand it. I don't think they can comprehend that somebody would have a set of values that would tell them that they should end up doing something that they don't personally agree with, that in fact may be bad for them, based on the fact that this is their job and that the overall package is worth this kind of loyalty. I don't think they know how to deal with it. And I suspect that's why they're getting flummoxed by it. And it raises my confidence in her even higher. If we'd had nothing but justices like this, it's impossible to say that that's not a conservative position now, but it wasn't always the case. If we get Republicans and Democrats and all the rest of the stuff out of it, if we had justices who were whose only concern was the concern that they were supposed to have, namely interpreting laws in the light of the United States Constitution, we wouldn't have the problems we have today.
Well, it was interesting because what I was thinking as just a benign observer was you should want someone like this.
Yes.
Because, frankly, the Republicans have the votes to confirm a justice that would come before them and say, I want to strike down Roe versus Wade. And yep. If the justice nominee said that, the Republicans have the votes to approve that person. Wouldn't you rather have somebody who said, it depends on the particulars of the case and what's written in the law and what the words of the Constitution meant at the time of their ratification?
Would the Democrats prefer somebody like this? I don't know. Rational people would. So I guess it's a coin toss. Yes, because and it's an excellent point, and it's a point that I think that the Democrats should consider. We have watched extremely left-wing courts basically undo constitutional law for 60 years now, at least 70, really closer to 100, really, when you get into the progressive era, which is at least 120 years old, this brand new idea that they've got. And what you would think you would want is that, but you make an excellent point. We have the votes to appoint Justice Rush Limbaugh if we want to. And this should come as a consolation to them, not as a consolation prize, as something that genuinely consoles them in the original meaning of the word, something that eases a burden of worry or doubt or fear or whatever. I know for myself that if it was a justice being nominated to the Supreme Court from a Democratic president, and they gave me that answer, I'd be enormously relieved. But this is the point. I'd be relieved because I believe in the Constitution. I believe the Constitution is written is perfect. I've yet to find a flaw in it. I find many, many flaws in what's going on today with our government, but all of them are due to the fact that they're no longer listening to what was written down in the instruction booklet. But this is where the entire idea of the Supreme Court diverges between conservatives and progressives. Conservatives see it as something that makes sure that we maintain the standards and the agreements. That's a much better term, really. The agreements that we all made. It is basically there to enforce the contract. Progressives see the courts as a way to change society when they cannot get these changes passed through legislation and signed by a president. And so the visions of the court are completely different. And our vision of the court is the vision of the court as it was laid down. We're not the ones who are changing the rules. We're not the ones who are changing the definitions. We're not the ones that are trying to turn this thing into something that it's not. But they are. And the idea that it would go back to its original purpose is terrifying to them.
And Bill, let me follow up with that, because I think there are some progressives, liberals, Democrats watching this show right now who think, well, this guy thinks that our laws that govern us today should be stamped in stone a couple of hundred years ago by people who had no idea what our lifestyle was like. But when you say the Constitution is perfect, that also encompasses the constitutional methodology and mechanism for changing the Constitution. So there's already that built into the recipe that if it comes a time where you look at the Constitution, you say it does not reflect contemporary mores, or we've learned some things since then, there is a mechanism by which the people can change it.
Well, you got me on that one, Scott. Oh, wait, no, you don't. Because there is, in fact, a mechanism for changing the Constitution, and that is the process of a constitutional amendment, which I believe is the most difficult thing to achieve in this country politically. And if we were talking about doing things the right way, and progressives wanted guns removed from society, for example, they wouldn't pass these extra constitutional gun laws and restrictions and all the rest. They'd go out and they'd get the votes, and then they'd have the 28th Amendment, which would repeal the Second Amendment, period. That's how it would be done. So yes, there is a mechanism to change the Constitution, but the people who are changing the Constitution are not using that mechanism because that mechanism is so difficult, intentionally so. So yes, I go back to my original statement that I think the Constitution is perfect. And by the way, this idea that the people of 250 years ago have no way of knowing what we're dealing with today is absolutely the fundamental difference between conservatives and progressives. Progressives continue to believe, and in the face of all evidence, and they will never change their minds, that they are the first generation to really understand something or see things in a moral light or whatever. They're constantly, there's something absolutely adolescent about this because it is a requirement of adolescence to rebel against your parents. If you don't rebel against existing authority, then you're never going to leave the house. It's wired into us to be absolute idiots when we're in our teens and 20s. It's just built into us. But this is the kind of thing I'm talking about. When I was 17, 18, 19, 20 years old in college, I thought that I was the only person and the only generation that understood that all of this stuff that's out there, all these power structures are all an illusion. And if we just did this, and this, and how easy it would be to do those things, then finally we'd free ourselves of the shackles of these previous generations and all of their prejudices and idiots, and Dad wouldn't let me have the keys for the car. So all of this stuff is a part of growing up. And then, as I like to say, after a while, if you're paying attention, life will beat the stupid out of you, and you'll begin to realize, as the essence of conservatism does realize, that human nature doesn't change. And to say that the founders didn't know what life was like or how to deal with this problem is exactly inverse of the actual truth.
I'm fantasizing about a conversation that the framers might have had of the Constitution as they look forward into the impact of their words on this document. And they say, well, what if they need to change it? And one of the framers would say, let's make it exceedingly difficult. Well, why should we make it exceedingly difficult? Because we want them to talk to each other. We want them to come together.
See, I'm so glad you said that, because every now and then the masks that we pay you to wear slips, and the man who wrote Freedom's Charter, the in-depth, magnificent look at the Constitution comes out. Yes, precisely right. Yes, it can be changed, but it would have to be changed with It would have to be changed conventionally, and it would have to be changed conservatively. And what I mean by that is it doesn't have to be changed according to what we call conservative values today, but it would have to be changed with enough social momentum to overcome the difficulties that they put in place of this. And when I say that the founders, when progressive dismissed the founders as saying, well, 250 years ago, what the hell did they know about the internet? George Washington and Jefferson and Franklin and all the rest of them didn't sit around and go, maybe one day it'll be possible if we harness lightning, and Ben Franklin's working on that, by the way, to connect all of the people in the world and in the country with an electronic system that allowed them to communicate with each other. I'm not saying that the
it's
founders—
a system of tubes.
System of tubes and wires, and please speak into the machine. But that's not the point. That's what progressives think. Progressives think, how could the founders have ever anticipated the internet? And therefore, how can you claim that we should rely on these 250-year-old words? But the answer is that the issues we're facing today are not about the internet. They're about free speech. They're about privacy. They're about responsibility. All of those things are things that they dealt with in magnificent fashion because it's so funny. I almost wanted to say because they followed the science, right? Because they were political animals. They studied politics. They didn't just come to the table with their political opinions. They came to the table as people who thought about politics for their entire lives. You know this story much, much better than I do. And every one of them brought something with them personally and something from the region that they came from, brought that too, put it all on the table, mixed it up, and started horse trading. And what came out of it? Not because of the genius of one or two or four or five individuals who you can see on our money, but because of everybody in that constitutional convention and on the foundation of the Declaration was bringing to the table all different kinds of human needs. They were bringing greed, they were bringing nobility, they were bringing selflessness, they were bringing slavery, they were bringing everything. And the agreement that was reached was an agreement that was hammered out by people of reason whose minds could be changed if they heard a better argument, or at the very, very least, were willing and mature enough to say, I just don't like this. I don't like it at all. But I do like the general idea better than I dislike this thing that they're asking me to sign. So I'm gonna take the lesser of two evils, or I'm gonna take 8 apples when I wanted 10, or however you want to describe it. But they were rational, reasonable people who could overcome their emotions for what they could see to be the greater good. And they understood that a constitution was better for all of them. And this is why I think the document is perfect. I think it's as perfect as any document ever written by humans can be. And I have yet to find a fault in it, with the possible exception of the failure of the Constitution to enumerate the number of justices on the Supreme Court.
Okay, final question. Back to Amy Coney Barrett in particular, the way Democrats on the Senate Judiciary Committee have been treating her. And by the way, after when they took a break for lunch, CNN came up and Dana Bash noted that Democrats that she'd been in contact with, I'm assuming she's either reading Twitter or she's texting people during the hearings, that Democrats basically said that Amy Coney Barrett gave a near perfect performance. One of the memes that has emerged from this is when one of the senators asked her what she has on her notepad, and she picked up her notepad and turned it around, and there was nothing. It was absolutely blank. And it's funny because before I heard that, as I was watching, Senator Dick Durbin was asking her a question and said, now referring to page 27, and Barrett never broke his gaze. She just kept looking at it.
No, she knows what's on page 27.
And so he read it, and she answered in detail.
I'm surprised that the news media and the Democrats didn't pick up the fact that during her lunch break, nominee Barrett's lunch break, she was called back home to churn butter on the orders of her husband, and managed to get all of that done in 45 minutes and get back in time for the rest of the hearing.
So that was all a side trail that I was chasing there. But the point was
with the big stick in the bucket. Yeah, just like in *Handmaid's Tale*.
The point was that our audience is churning right now. The point was that they seem to think the way they're asking her questions, one of two things is the only thing I can come up with. Number one, she's being dishonest, that she really will let her moral code and her pre-existing ideas and her life experience steer the direction of her rulings, that she's being disingenuous, that she's just going to read the text of the law and of the Constitution and try to determine as accurately as possible. So number one, either she's lying, or number two, they just can't fathom it. They think that she must have another agenda because essentially they're projecting their own view onto her. Which do you think it is?
I think it's both. But the very first answer I had to this question an hour and a half ago when we started on this segment was just disbelief, that just incomprehension, the inability to believe that she could possibly be telling the truth. And you bring up one final point that's interesting too. The progressives need the courts because progressives know that they cannot get what they want past the American people in the form of legislation signed by a president, which is why when you
or a
ask
governor
somebody,
or state assembly for that matter.
whatever the case may be, when you ask somebody like let's just say the current Democratic vice presidential candidate, and you ask them, you've been ranked the most liberal member of the Senate. That must make you proud, right? Well, I don't know what good labels will do. Really? If somebody called me the most conservative member of the Senate, I'd wear that in a t-shirt. But the reason I bring this up is because it is part of the progressive strategy to openly lie about the things that they believe in, with the understanding that other progressives fully understand that, yes, they're lying about things like fracking, but they're just doing that so that they can get elected past all of these idiot rubes who don't understand that fracking is going to destroy the Earth's crust and blah, 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 blah. And so there's this unseen kind of an agreement between progressive voters and progressive candidates, where progressive candidate will say something like, no, I didn't say we're going to ban fracking. No, fracking definitely is great. Everybody knows, Biden knows, and his voters know, and hopefully the people in Pennsylvania know that he's saying that so that he can get elected and that he won't lose his progressive base over it, because they fully understand that he's lying about it in order to get elected. And this denial of who you are, forget politics, this denial of who you are is the essence of what I despise about progressivism, is this idea that I have to lie about what I believe in order to gain the power that I crave so desperately. They can't comprehend her. And that's because when you have a moral code, you are willing to do the right thing instead of the smart thing. And for progressives, there is no distinction between these two things. There's only the smart right thing, which is to get as much power as possible and fix people for their own benefit who aren't as smart as they are. And I think they find her a mystery, and I couldn't be happier with her performance, but much more importantly than her performance, I could not be more impressed with her character and her intellect. And I find it unbearably ironic, and I suspect that the Democrats do too. I suspect the Democrats understand that here is a woman who is being nominated to the Supreme Court of the United States, who owes nobody anything in terms of influence, in terms of intellect, in terms of nothing. When you get that kind of a mind in front of people, I think it awes Democrats as much as it awes Republicans. The only difference being is that the Republicans aren't surprised by it.
Ladies and gentlemen, we're grateful that you watch this program, even more so that you subscribe to our YouTube channel, and ultimately that you become a member at BillWhittle.com. Those are the folks who make this possible, that have carried us on their shoulders these many years and have made it part of our joy to be able to have conversations about deep, meaningful things that are then multiplied and spread around the world. Those members actually run their own blog on our website. We actually trust them to do that. Can you imagine that? There's no pre-screening of blog posts at BillWhittle.com for our members. So if you'd like to become one of those members, just go to BillWhittle.com, click the big green Become a Member button. For Bill Whittle, I'm Scott Ott. Thanks for watching.